Try something smart to chew on. The Lunchroom on RCI, Monday to Friday, 12:45 to 2 p.m. The Lunchroom. Informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI. Food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It's Tuesday, the 2nd of July, 2024. This is program number 1205 of the Lunchroom, and I'm your host, Calix George Jr. Now, of course, in addition to Radio 101.1 FM, you can get us at our website, rcistlucia.com. We're also streaming live on Facebook. Just search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International, and of course, be sure to like and share that link as well with your friends and family. And of course, don't forget, we are on our website as well. We're streaming there. It's rcistlucia.com. You can get our previous programs on that platform. Now, if you want to send out some birthday greetings for today, then that is going out first to Mr. Daniel Francois. Happy birthday to you, sir. Hope you're having a fantastic birthday. Also sending some birthday greetings out to Miss Noelissa and Catherine. Happy birthday to you, Noelissa, and we hope that you're having a fantastic birthday celebration. And also over the seas to Mrs. Deborah George Hatcher. Happy birthday to you. Wishing you a fantastic birthday as well. Some history for today. In the year 1823, in Brazil, it is considered Bahia's Independence Day. It was the end of Portuguese rule in Brazil, with the final defeat of the Portuguese crown colonists in the province of Bahia. In 1865, one-time Methodist Reformed Church minister William Booth and his wife Catherine Booth founded the East London Christian Mission, which is now known as the Salvation Army. 1964, on this day, saw the United States President Lyndon B. Baines Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act into law. And in 1990, on this day, July the 2nd, 1,426 pilgrims were trampled to death after a panic in a tunnel in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. We now move on to our dish of the day. The daily dish is brought with the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+, need all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down to my nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Lance Road in Castries, Bosses Jubilee Lane, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
Welcome back to our program here for today, for this Tuesday, as we've entered the brand new month of July. And of course, in the Windward Islands, we are now in a state of recovery in the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl. And Beryl continues on into the Caribbean Sea. I believe it has become a Category 5 hurricane. Of course, that is the highest category that exists for hurricanes. And it is heading across and is expected to potentially impact the south coast of Jamaica. Of course, in its wake, crossing the Windward Islands, significant devastation. For the most part here in St. Lucia, we seem to have gotten off relatively well, all things considered, with no reports of any loss of life. And for the main, damage seems to have been within or centered more so about coastal damage, storm surge, the impact of storm surge on our coastal communities. It would appear that the communities of Labrie and as well Soufre seem to have gotten a fair battering, and certainly those individuals who depend on the sea, in particular fishers, they certainly have been impacted. In some communities, quick steps were taken to protect vessels. I think in Denrien, for example, we actually saw the vessels being portaged up onto the Mole Street, the main street through the village of Dennery, taking these vessels out of the water completely. Even though there is, in fact, a pretty sheltered Daito, as it's known, or area that is protected by breakwaters, constructed by the Japanese government, the Denry fishing port. But of course, we've seen. We can look at the images that came out of Barbados yesterday, and their fishing port, their main fishing port in Bridgetown, experienced considerable damage, even though those vessels were within the general coverage area or sheltered area within the breakwater. Significant damage there in terms of the loss of vessels and boats. An image that came out pretty early for those who are tracking vessels, maritime traffic was a significant amount of maritime traffic left Grenada, heading for Trinidad, seeking shelter away from the impending hurricane. And perhaps that was certainly a wise decision in that regard, because certainly we've seen the impacts in Barbados and certainly right here in St. Lucia with respect to vessels being damaged, destroyed, in some instances even completely sunk. Not too long ago, we actually witnessed the sinking of the brig Unicorn. It wasn't under any sort of major hurricane or tropical storm in the channel between St. Vincent and St. Lucia. But, and of course, that was a pretty famous brig, wooden vessel, and it was part of the Pirates of the Caribbean. And of course, its replacement, the Pearl, which of course was a pretty popular vessel for boat parties. It of course has had seen better days certainly, and was in fact faced even issues in terms of staying afloat. And it was in fact even, I think, recently purchased with the intention of converting it into a restaurant near the area called De la Batterie, I think it is, on the northern side of the town of Grosley. And unfortunately, there too, it may very well be seeing its a resting place, as it's also experienced some significant damage and went under, albeit perhaps in shallow water. The same fate has also been met for another pirate excursion boat in Barbados, the famous Jolly Roger, which would have done so many different beach parties and excursions. There too, in fact, it seems to have also gone down. And of course, the brunt of the devastation in the Windward Islands was faced by the Grenadine Islands. And the Eye of Beryl went over the island of Carriacou, which is part of Grenada. It is an island that is belongs to Grenada. It's in fact considered Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. And unfortunately, that island in the Grenadines faced utter devastation, unfortunately, extensive damage in terms of loss of roofs. There is no power. That is completely knocked out, as one can well imagine. There is difficulty in even clearing of roads, according to Prime Minister of Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique, the Honorable Decon Mitchell, who gave a statement earlier on today, indicating that the gas stations are damaged. They can't even get fuel to be able to get the heavy equipment to begin clearance of roads. There were 2 reported fatalities this morning, and of course, those were the known ones. That number may very well increase. I understand there may very well have been a fatality as well, even on the island of Grenada. The Prime Minister there was reporting that it appeared to be a tale of 2 islands, because the northern side of Grenada got considerable damage, as well one can well imagine. The eye passed north of Grenada. Carriacou finds itself just about 32 kilometers north of the of Sortiers in Grenada, and so the northern part of Grenada also experienced some significant damage in terms of roofs, power being out, of course, over there as well, blocked roads, and so there was an immediate effort also ongoing in Grenada, but certainly in Carriacou, that of course is a very, very difficult situation, because as has been mentioned, they have no power. There's no energy, no fuel at this point in time to be able to provide the kind of energy that we need to get to those the equipment going. There's also an issue of the sea still being choppy, and so their Coast Guard vessels, Grenada Coast Guard vessels, can't get across there as yet. There's an attempt to get a larger vessel to head across to Carriacou, and we'd have to see how that continues to pan out. Carriacou has a population of about 10,000 people. It is, in fact, the most populous of all the Grenadine islands, and it is one of the largest of the Grenadine islands. It is about 31 square kilometers, about 12 square miles, and of course, it has been tended to be very famous for its diving, and it really is the island of reefs, which is what Carriacou actually means, and unfortunately, of course, there will be significant damage to that island, and of course to the entire economy. They've been, of course, trying to encourage their own economic activity. The Carriacou Carnival has become a little famous as well in that regard, and of course, they've certainly been no stranger to hurricanes. Certainly, they would have seen Hurricane Janet. They would have also saw Hurricane Ivan, which hit back in September of 2004, 20 years ago, as well as Hurricane Emily as well. And now, of course, they have just dealt with the ravages of Hurricane Beryl, which hit just yesterday. Of course, it is a historic hurricane in that it is the earliest hurricane of this magnitude ever. One would well imagine that these are hurricanes that you would expect when the waters are very, very much warm after a long summer, and the waters are very exceedingly warm. And so normally we get a lot more activity towards the September. September, October generally would be when you would see the peaking of the hurricane season. Not so early, but what, of course, the meteorologists and climatologists are actually saying is that the current ocean is almost as hot as if it's September, and so that is it's above average by a good number of degrees, beyond the normal temperature you would normally get for July at this time, early July, and that of course is making for a very very good ground for the development and very intensive development of hurricanes in this region. So certainly, it's not good, and we're certainly far, far from being out of the woods, albeit that the barrel has moved on. But we certainly have to be very, very much prepared for additional storms. The expectation, I think, was that there would be 7 major hurricanes for this hurricane season. And in fact, we also have to be monitoring another system that is not too far away from Beryl. And of course, we'll have to see how that, of course, pans out soon enough. The damage right here in St. Lucia, as I mentioned, the assessments are still being done. It appears for the most part not as bad as we were expecting, thankfully, because we didn't get up to the ferocity of the winds that would have been expected. But of course, with bananas, it doesn't take much to throw them down, and so of course we no doubt there would probably still be a impact on the agricultural sector in some areas, and of course, as I mentioned, the fisheries sector, the damage to vessels, the certainly there are other areas which got damage in terms of jetties, um, other areas are with roads, and of course the damage was as far north as Dominica. We were seeing images coming out of Roseau and the Dame Eugenia Charles Boulevard, the Bayfront there, of course, and storm surge, the impact of the sea on our settlements, which are largely along the coast, and it's something that we've got to be very very mindful of. Of course, we saw what happened in Soufrière, and of course we've been hearing about plans for that area as well, and redevelopment of the waterfront, and of course within that context, the importance of resilience is critical. In fact, the jetty down at one of the jetties that down in Soufrière got damaged, the L jetty, shaped one, and of course even places like the Soufrière Beach Park that also got some damage there, and so we'll perhaps have to wait to continue to hear some of the assessments, but certainly it's something to be thinking about in terms of our coastal protection. There has been over the years significant funds, sums of money spent in coastal protection, and we can think of places like Dennery, for instance, which is as well as Soufrière, and breakwaters being placed to protect the shoreline, that built up shoreline, and certainly has helped in some communities. But we can see, of course, that it is an ongoing and very expensive undertaking. And so, as we continue to plan forward, it is really important that we realize that this is the new normal, and it's going to perhaps get even more regular, more intense. And that reality, and perhaps this event of Hurricane Beryl, should be another reminder, another wake-up call with respect to how we plan, how we are looking at developments along the coastline. I think many people from Sufra would have remembered Hurricane Lenny back, I think, in 2009 or so. And of course, the impact that it had then on the West Coast. And quite often we think of, the East Coast communities as the ones that are going to be more vulnerable. But in fact, yes, sometimes we can see the impact of, depending on the orientation of or where the hurricane is located relative to our island. In this instance, the Southwest got a considerable blow, and even in fact, the whole of the West Coast, as far up as Grosley, we've seen the impact of it. So certainly, it is clearly a major issue in terms of storm surge, in terms of how we can move forward. Thankfully, not so much of the flooding in this instance, because we didn't get as much that much rainfall compared to a tropical storm Debbie or Hurricane Tomas. And so we should be thankful for that. But it is certainly something that sometimes when you have both of them together, storm surges as well as flooding, that is really the perfect storm scenario, isn't it? And the devastation can be pretty dire. So we've got to count our blessings with respect to Beryl. Of course, also prepare ourselves to be able to assist our neighboring islands, in particular St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Have not heard very much from Petit Martinique, a very small island, very small population. I don't think it's more than about 1,500 people or so, between Grenada and Carriacou. But it quite likely is also going to be a very sad story from there as well. From all the images that we've been seeing coming out of Union Island, Palm Island, of course, the Grenadines, they have been to some degree sort of the economic drivers of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in that a lot of the tourism is marine based. It's dependent on yachting. It's dependent on the activities on many of these islands, the getaway homes and the real estate and that sort of thing. And so certainly it's going to be a significant impact on these islands and the people who live on them. And so certainly we have to spare thought for them at this time. That's our dish of the day. When we come back, we're going to take in our weather report.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A plus. Did all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Box, doors, you'll see. Come down to mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Grosley, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939.
Girl, I've been so stressed searching for the perfect tiles to complete my home. Really? Yeah, it's always the same white, beige, and gray tiles with these tile stores. Like they're all buying from the same place. You're the design expert. Help me, please. I'm fed up. What are you looking for? Something different. Something that says Caribbean beauty and suits my personality. Something vibrant and classy with a little razzle dazzle. Okay, Ms. Razzle Dazzle, I know just the place. Island Style Tile and Bath, they're my number one store for everything tile. And with their new In Living color collection, you'll find the most gorgeous styles to give you that splash of Caribbean flair you're looking for. That sounds perfect. I'll even take you myself and throw in a free design consultation. I'll never say no to that, sis. I can't afford you anyway.
Visit our island-style showrooms in Castries, Rodney Bay, and View Fort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. Will help bring your vision to life in living color.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And that's of course on the 1.1. It's now time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talamba. The forecast for St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours. The winds will be blowing from the east, southeast to east-northeast near 70 miles per hour or 28 kilometers per hour, with gusts near showers. The weather partly cloudy and hazy, becoming cloudy at times, with widely scattered showers for the remainder of today and tonight. Cloudy to overcast with moderate to heavy showers and thunderstorms with gusty winds tomorrow. Also, there is an advisory in heavy rain. Small craft operators and sea beavers are advised to exercise caution. And the forecast for the Los Antilles: partly cloudy to cloudy at times with widely scattered showers for the remainder of today and tonight. Tomorrow will be cloudy to overcast with moderate to heavy showers, thunderstorms, and gusty winds over the Windward Islands. And the tropical weather outlook: Beryl will continue to move westward over the Caribbean Sea away from the Lesser Antilles. Also, showers and thunderstorms associated with the tropical wave located several hundred miles east of the Windward Islands will affect the Windward Islands from tomorrow morning. Environmental conditions are only marginal conducive for additional development of this wave as it moves generally westward at 15 to 20 miles per hour. This disturbance has a low chance of development during the next 7 days. Also, another tropical wave located over the eastern Atlantic is moving westward near 17 miles per hour or 28 kilometers per hour. And this was your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talamba.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Girl, I've been so stressed searching for the perfect tiles to complete my home. Really? Yeah, it's always the same white, beige, and gray tiles with the style stores. Like they're all buying from the same place. You're the design expert. Help me, please. I'm fed up. What are you looking for? Something different. Something that says Caribbean beauty and suits my personality. Something vibrant and classy with a little razzle dazzle. Okay, Ms. Razzle Dazzle, I know just the place. Island Style Tile and Bath, they're my number one store for everything tile. And with their new In Living Color collection, you'll find the most gorgeous styles to give you that splash of Caribbean flair you're looking for. That sounds perfect. I'll even take you myself and throw in a free design consultation. I'll never say no to that, sis. I can't afford you anyway.
Visit our island-style showrooms in Castries, Rodney Bay, and View Fort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. Will help bring your vision to life in living color.
And welcome back to our program here today at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. Of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, and perhaps tell us about how you fed the storm yesterday. It is 452-3046. Let's go to the phone lines at this time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Good afternoon, Mr. George.
How are you doing, sir?
And not too bad.
All right, and hopefully
Right.
no damage on your end.
Yeah. So what I think, Grenada, they look very bad luck with these hurricanes because that's not the first time it really hit in Grenada. Quite a few times it hit in Grenada.
Well, I think we can say that for all our islands. Perhaps.
Yeah, but I know for Grenada, 1 year I was home for holiday, and everything was flat down in Grenada.
Maybe so. I mean, of course, we all, I think,
and
remember Hurricane Ivan.
Even those buildings stronger.
Yes, Hurricane Ivan, I think, was one of the last major ones that certainly had a significant impact on Grenada's economy. It completely devastated that island. All the churches and buildings were just completely devastated. Yeah, and since then they've done quite a bit. I mean, 20
And I'm
years on
surprised
now,
they
eh?
didn't mention that island then. Union. Union is just,
Union Island, yes.
yeah, there's a little gap between Union and Kaku.
Yes, no, but Union Island has also, I mean, based on the Vincentian authorities, they have also been indicated.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
well, yeah,
That
Union
Union
is
has
the
also,
Grenadines.
yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
And
Union is the Grenadines.
it's on the
And then you have
Vincentian
the
side of the
Kaku,
Grenadines.
and then Petit Matnik.
Hmm.
Like when you sail in, if you don't want to pass Leeward, you pass Windward, you pass between in the back of Kaku and Petit Matnik, and you just stretch to for Trinidad.
Hmm.
But
And
but what I call you mostly about Goldport Holding,
Global Port Holdings.
Holding,
Yes.
spending a lot of money in Soufriere right now.
Well, they have not yet
They
begun
don't
doing.
start yet.
No.
Oh, you see, I was out of.
No, they have not. And
Yeah.
and so right, and I mean what you're pointing out is very important because Soufriere is it's not a sheltered harbor like Castries, right? And of course, we can see that quite often these sea swells can come in and do a significant amount of damage along the coastline.
Yeah.
And so right, so whatever is actually done there needs to be very much in mind with not necessarily putting too much heavy infrastructure in that area. In fact, and I would also say the same for Castries too. We need to be mindful of, although we're not seeing it now, we haven't seen it in this.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Castries is very rare. The hurricane, the wind coming through the north, the west.
Right.
Because
So the
when you come west, then
orientation,
you come through our harbor.
yeah, the orientation of it doesn't, but it generally does not allow for too much. But we have seen storm sea swells,
Definitely.
and you see it happening even right in front of the government buildings in and the Conway area.
Conway, yeah.
You do see the water coming over at some point, and so and the thing about it though is that the projections are suggesting that as the sea level continues to rise, you're going to have an increased impact of storm surge, right? So it is something that we've got to be very mindful of. And of course, we did see some flooding in Castries yesterday. There was a bit saw some images coming
it
out
looked
of.
like they didn't clean the drain. They said once they clean the drain.
I'm not sure if it's only about cleaning the
help a
drain, so that's one aspect. But then, I mean, obviously, there's the pumps that have to work, and the thing is, if you got a high tide and you got your swells
Well, the high tide, because when this without any hurricane or anything, sometimes the very high tide affecting.
Precisely, that's my point, caller. So even with just the high tide, you can see the impact, right? And so if you marry that at the same time with a system, you can certainly have some major impacts in with Castries. We're fortunate.
That's why they had to block Prince Albert Basin, because the water was coming straight from Prince Albert Basin right across Manuel
Street.
Street.
Yes. Well, it's still coming.
But again, if you sometimes they use a lot of hard core to break the water, but to me it can affect other places when you do that, when you break, because there is in front of the cemetery of VG there.
Right.
There is break there, but it affects the beach.
It does affect the beach, yes, and actually that's not quite the recommended approach. To yes, you're very correct about that. I think you've been seeing some placement of gabion baskets to sort of try to prevent the soil erosion on
Yeah.
the cemetery. As a result of that, though, because you create these hard surfaces, it then encourages the erosion in front of it. So then you lose beach. So, in terms of the approach, I mean, obviously you're going to have to really bring in, coastal engineers to look at the better approach in terms of how to prevent this. Now, of course, it might mean offshore breakwaters, quite possibly might be the better approach on that side. In the case of cast trees, of course, as you rightly said, we already do have some very hard surfaces. But then how do you drain that area quick enough is one issue. And then further down too, we're gonna start seeing, maybe not right away, but we're already getting to the point where storm surge is going to become a major issue. And as to what the solution is going to be, whether we're going to need like a tidal barrier like the Thames, place at the mouth of
Oh,
the river,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
It
these
lifts
are
up.
very expensive. Obviously, these are very expensive options to deal with this impact of storm surge. And
Well, with the high tide, it lifts up with the tide. The tide will lift it up all the time there. The higher the current come, is the highest it go. But that costs a lot of money, and that time there, money wasn't much.
right. Well, but the other thing too is how we build, and we've been seeing in Grenada, for instance. You mentioned Grenada, and I note that even as they were rebuilding, in the post Ivan era, they
Yeah.
were trying hard to make a point of not, especially the essential buildings. They wanted to locate their essential buildings in safe places. So in some instances, in elevated locations. Yeah. So the new Parliament building, for instance, they actually shifted it up onto a hill. I think near Fort Frederick, near where the old government house used to be located. They've actually placed their Parliament building up on the top there, and they're planning on putting their halls of justice on the elevated area above the St George's. So you see your critical buildings that might you want to be resilient. Your hospitals, your
What's about the St. George's University? Where they put it?
well, no, St George's University it's elevated because it's on a sort of a promontory, you could say. So it's not a high up, but it's on a promontory.
Well, it's good enough where it is, eh?
It is good enough where it is. It's actually pretty close to the airport, which is a whole other matter. Right? So I don't know
Yeah.
from that perspective. I'm not sure how much of a great location it is but it's right at the end of the airport runway. Um, but it's in a very, I suppose they were more looking at from the aesthetic perspective. It's right next to the along the coastline, True Blue Bay around there. So it's a nice location from that perspective. But and but it could potentially um have impacts from other issues, like as I mentioned, the proximity to the airport. But yeah, but it's not so bad. But yeah, but certainly,
Anyway, Mr. George,
thanks very
I'll
much,
say
caller.
good afternoon.
Have a
Let
good one.
somebody get a
Yes,
break.
sure. Thanks very much, caller. And of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today is 452-3046. And for those who are following Beryl, it appears that as of now, in fact, Jamaica is under hurricane warning, and it is expected to be getting there somewhere around Wednesday, and it's perhaps not. Originally, it was tracking south of Jamaica, but it looks like it might very well pass over Jamaica along its current trajectory. Let's take in another call at this time. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Good afternoon. Just a little storm.
Just a little storm.
Yeah, in the field. Yeah, sometimes, it's like, I feel like, um, we don't need to go far for information. Although people know everything, it doesn't matter of just putting things on a level. It's not anything new you're saying, Because I mean, sometimes being repetitive is not always, you know, why. But what I'm saying is, if we use the opportunity of a storm to do a dry run, say like, how do you call it? It's like how do we always call it? When we a simulation, more or less, exercise. In case of a storm, and people talk about the policies of where the centers are not open until after the storm. And then I heard certain person call and say, whereas people would come and just have you already asking for dinner. He was involved. I'm saying, look at the personality. And what happened in the community, it's like, it's more like an opportunity for people to, come together. Like in the schools, if you reach there, you could at least, use these areas and rehearse in case of a serious thing. You may have to use the food that's there because sometimes they expire. You already thrown it by the containers. And, everything comes to and every time it's the same thing as we could expect. That's so predictable.
So you're saying that I'm trying to understand the point that about the opening of shelters.
Yes, many people are complaining that as usual after the event.
Oh, and that shelter. Well, shelters are generally on an as needs basis. I would imagine.
Yeah.
I don't know that. In fact, if you know, for instance, that an area is going to be, depending on. I mean, you've got to look at. You've got to do your risk profiling.
Yes.
And you've got to be able to see, well, okay, if you know that this area is going to be prone to flooding and you're expecting a lot of flooding, you may decide to activate a shelter in a particular area beforehand, especially when you know that there are people who are in fact already in harm's way. So, in fact, in some instances, you may require people to leave their homes. And if you're requiring people to leave their homes, obviously that's when you would certainly be activating a shelter in that situation. I'm not sure that you would say that shelters would have to be opened immediately.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking in general in terms of what people are people may be commenting. So it's and this is why again the local knowledge is important. This is why you have to have your local disaster.
Who's more vulnerable? Somebody must be in charge. Who's more vulnerable? At least that is one thing at least.
Right.
Valuable information.
Right. And so especially if you have individuals who may be living alone, who may have senior citizens, those individuals, you may very well take preemptive action and in fact bring them into a shelter, certainly.
Yeah.
Now, so I think, the issue, we do have issues in terms of the quality of the shelters. That's the other thing too. We don't have, as far as I'm aware, any sort of purpose single-use shelters, right? Most of our shelters will be facilities that have other uses, whether they may be schools or churches. And there are implications in terms of how you equip them and staff them and of course provide support. And some of them may not, for instance, and I don't know in the case of churches how it always works in terms of places for proper bathing and water storage and whatnot. There's been a lot of effort, I know, in trying to get some of the community centers and HRDCs to be more resilient, and by providing them with certain facilities to be able to support their work as shelters. And that is something that I think is important.
What I'm saying, food should not be an issue in terms of, because I mean we have supplies and what have you, but there again, the number of people should not be an issue at all, because there might be a real situation where we need to move all these people. It might not, what I'm saying is just like a simulation, something, because we do that all the time. In case of tsunami, you see, children have to quit their school and everything have to happen. And people should probably take that as a form of, understanding where we have to actually improve on our thing. Because at least that's one thing we have. Because still, we must realize if you're so concerned about people, for instance, you should be capable of if you are in governing, to afford people 3 meals a day and everybody their belly full and everybody healthy and so on, and then you could throw the rest for your dog or your pet. You know what I mean? You would always be, that is one aspect of life, before I myself want to approach anything like that. So I'm saying that's what the people are saying, and that's what I feel. It's more like an assimilation. It's not a bad thing, to at least demonstrate to the people, like at least we could fix up whatever problems we may have. But in real situation, because as far as I'm concerned,
yes.
In the preemptive state of that report there, we had the prospect of another storm, coming after that for the 3 days. And you hardly hear anything about that, but you hear this kind of argument going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just shared the weather report, and it
It's
doesn't seem as
recorded.
if it's likely to be developing based on what the Met Services is saying. So that's
Well, the Met
thankful
Service
for
is not
that.
saying it as the Met Service is not mentioning it either. I heard that
Well,
from
no, it just was mentioned in our report. Yeah, so
okay, all
it
right,
was
yeah.
indicated. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Thanks very much for that contribution,
You're
caller,
welcome, bro.
and do have yourself a good day.
Yeah,
I do think though, in terms of shelters, I mean, obviously, the most important aspect of a shelter in the first instance is protection of life, and if it is that, especially if you're having a direct hit and you know that there are people who potentially may not have homes that could withstand the impact of wind in particular. Definitely, in terms of activating shelters in some of these situations, is very, very important. But of course, as I mentioned, the quality of the shelter is also an issue. And so I mean, we saw some of the images coming out of um, out of Carriacou, and we saw churches, their roofs were gone. There are a lot of places where the roofs were gone as well. So the designing of shelters is and the assessment of the shelters, I think, is also a really important thing. I know there was an ongoing issue about a shelter, for instance, in the community of Diga Miku, and it's been raised in the past, I believe, and people were pointing out that this building, which is being placed as a shelter or is on the list, is not suitable to be a shelter. So I think that is another issue too, and maybe it comes to the same point that the caller is making, that in terms of actually looking at these things, are we doing any kind of simulation as to how we respond in these real situations, and should it be maybe on a community by community basis? Every so often you do some sort of a simulation in that regard. It's quite often required for things like airports, but given the fact that the chances of us being hit by a hurricane is pretty high, so the idea of preparation in that regard is certainly something to look at. And the other thing too is that we have lots of shelters on these lists sometimes, but then the question is, do we have good quality shelters? I think that's the other aspect that we've got to be thinking of. So of course, it's not easy when we're speaking about the impacts of climate change. These are some of the things that we've got to be talking about. That you've got hurricanes that are coming with greater wind speeds, greater likelihood of roof loss. The impact is becoming very dire. We've seen what has happened with Beryl right now, and even before that with Ivan, with Maria, with Irma, and the list goes on. We can go back to Alan. We know the impacts are very real. Yes, we would like to believe that we have a more resilient country, but the reality is it's only when it gets tested, it's only when you actually face a category 4, category 5 hurricane that you're really going to see it. But we should certainly be thinking even beyond this as to how we can be building and designing to be more resilient against these types of weather events. And there are lots of different factors that are at play in terms of resilience. It could be in terms of your water supply. It could be whether you have one part of your house that it can be effectively a storm shelter, a hurricane shelter, in terms of not having very many windows or a space that you can actually seek refuge in that event. The strength of the roof as well is another matter. I know a lot of people are these days, especially the modern homes, are thinking about having concrete roofs. There are pluses and minuses there, of course, but that's certainly something that we're seeing in some homes. The issue, of course, of being able to have sufficient supplies ready is one that we seem to take fairly seriously, I think. But certainly, the matter of resilience is a very, very important one within this context. So, unfortunately, we are looking at potential direct impact for Jamaica, and that certainly is not something that I think they would want to necessarily be having to deal with at this point. But this is, of course, the reality of the Caribbean, and of course, which is what we're dealing with even more at this time. There's a very interesting article from the Guardian on why Hurricane Beryl foretells a scary storm season, and it speaks to the hot sea temperatures are fueling storms' explosive growth into an unprecedented early whopper. And that story coming from the Associated Press, which details some of the impacts of Beryl. But unfortunately, we don't have enough time to share that right now. We'll probably do so tomorrow as we continue to see how the island fares, and of course the Caribbean, the Windward Islands fares, and of course uh, Jamaica as well, as it continues to head westward, northwestward at this time. And so that's our program for today on the Lunchroom, and we do hope that you can join us again tomorrow, God willing, for another one. I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.